All right, so hi everyone. I'm so glad you all could be here. Thank you to everyone tuning in to this very important conversation. Before we begin, I would like to go over some space agreements. My name is Skylar. I am a counselor and a board member for Anytown Las Vegas, and I will be serving as the moderator for this conversation. And I'll be taking questions from the Zoom chat and through Facebook Live. We're going to do our best to get through as many questions as possible, although we already have some laid out for us. Throughout the duration of this conversation, I'm going to ask that everyone keep their mics on mute. This virtual town hall is being recorded and streamed via Facebook as well. So every month, youth leaders from the Anytown Las Vegas program host a virtual town hall and invite community leaders and subject matter experts for an in-depth conversation on topics related to social justice. So this month, I was the one who launched Anytown's Get Out the Vote campaign, and we encouraged and educated our peers and youth leaders on the importance of voting, as well as how to do it and how to encourage others to do so. So part of that campaign is this town hall right here. And today, our panelists include Brenda Guigui. She is the Digital Communications Director for Make It Work Nevada, and Erika Castro, the Organizing Manager of PLAN, aka the Progressive Leadership Alliance of Nevada. So thank you both for coming. I would love to begin this conversation by hearing briefly from our panelists and the work they do. Brenda, would you like to go first?
Yeah, hi Skylar. Thank you for doing this. Thank you, Anytown Las Vegas. This is awesome. I'm Brenda. I am the communications organizer, digital communications organizer with Make It Work Nevada. I do a little bit of everything. It's been a roller coaster and a ride. I do all the digital stuff, our social media, which has been an adventure because I was not social media savvy before this. I was the old mom with what is Twitter? So it's been a lot of fun and a lot of learning to do. Now during the pandemic, we're starting to do a lot of producing and doing lives on our Facebook page and on Zooms. So I started producing more streams and more shows, and that's been so much fun because I get to organize them and make them, personalize them. So it's been great. I love it. I love the work that I do. And then with the election being around the corner, I also started our voter registration program and doing our VR campaign. And it was also very different, something new for me. But I love registering folks to vote. I love talking to folks. And I'm a Leo, so I get very competitive. So trying to convince them to actually register is a challenge for me because they're like, it doesn't matter. No, it matters. And let me tell you why. So I kind of, that's the me trying to just make it fun for myself, right? And then people get to know new things. So it's interesting. You have really good conversation with folks who don't really know in depth, how it works and stuff. Yes, Leos, rock on. Skylar's a Leo too, so. But that's me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing, Brenda. And Skylar, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. And I'm super excited to be on Anytown Las Vegas talking to you all. I actually was an attendee. I was someone that went to Anytown when I was in high school, and I haven't been able to go back. So I'm just really excited to be a part of this because Anytown was actually one of the first places besides my organizing work where I really just started to learn about social justice. So I have great and amazing memories from participating in Anytown. And then for my work now, so as I mentioned, in Anytown, I learned the basics of what social justice was, and I really understood that, like, as a person of color, my experiences were very different compared to other people. But even when I graduated high school, I was still very nervous about talking about my immigration status and being vocal about things. But it wasn't until later on in my life that I found Plan Action and Plan and started working with them. And most of my work has been around immigrant rights. So when I first started, I was fighting for immigrant rights. I had DACA at the time and really wanted to make sure that my community, my parents specifically, had the opportunity of feeling that sense of relief that I did when I got DACA. So that's what I've been doing for the past 5 years, organizing around immigrant rights, making sure that we're protecting DACA, TPS, and pushing for a comprehensive immigration reform that's actually going to put everyone on a path to citizenship, regardless of who they are, because we always see that a lot of times people like our parents are the ones that are being left out. So really fighting against that. Right now, some of the biggest things that we're focusing on is obviously the election. So that's one of the biggest things that we're focusing on right now. But we also do work around criminal justice reform, economic justice, environmental justice. We do a lot of civic engagement as well, making sure that people understand the process of elections, but also the legislative process and how to be engaged at a local level.
Awesome. Thank you both so much. You both do great work. I can attest to that. So I'd like to start off our series of questions just by understanding exactly what we're looking at here. Many people understand that voting is a right to every American in the Constitution, yet voter turnout has been historically low for youth ages 18 to 29. The US Census Bureau has documented that this group has had the lowest voter turnout for decades up until the 2018 election. A quote from them is, among 18 to 29-year-olds, voter turnout went from 20% in 2014 to 36% in 2018, the largest percentage point increase for any age group. Why do you think that there was such a huge jump in 2018? And do you think that there will be a similar voter turnout in 2020?
Ooh, I can start. So 2018 was actually the first election that I participated, voted for a midterm. So I was, those young adults that didn't really care about midterms. And I think as I started getting older and I started learning how important midterm elections were locally, that's where I started kind of trying to educate more folks, my friends especially, because we were all, kind of like, oh, politics, right? And I think we all go through that stage, like, my vote doesn't matter. But I think 2018 motivated a lot of folks because it was the first year we had, the current president. And I think a lot of folks were just frustrated and they wanted to see a change. And that first step was to vote in the midterm election. Because even that was my first year I even started doing this progressive work too. So being on the field and registering folks to vote, they were just kind of like, yeah. And I had to kind of explain, it's not a presidential election, this is what's up for vote, but they were just motivated and they wanted to do something and see a change. So it was an interesting year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's really interesting to know that there was such a huge turnout in a midterm election from young folks, because typically people are more invested in presidential elections. That's where campaigns tend to spend more money. That's when we see a lot more ads, more people knocking on your doors. So the fact that we saw in 2018 such a spike in young voters and making sure that they came out and that they voted, and not only that they voted, but for the vast majority, they voted for progressive candidates. I think that can be an indication that we'll continue to see that in 2020, but definitely don't want to one, jinx it. Still want to make sure that folks get out and vote, but also not be complacent. Just because we had huge numbers in 2018 doesn't mean that we get to be complacent in 2020. It has to continue to build. So if you're a young person that got out and voted in 2018, make sure that the people that didn't vote with you then, that they do get out and vote in 2020. And I think Brenda's right. I think young folks are starting to really see how their future is impacted by those that are in power, and they're taking action into their own hands. They are not sitting back and waiting for, someone to finally do something about gun reform so that they don't have to go to school in fear. And I think some of those things that they're having to deal with, like school shootings, like climate change, like the inaccessibility of higher education because you're drowning in debt, I think young folks are starting to really see all of those things and saying, like, no, this isn't enough. Like, this is my future and I have to do something about it. And I'm just really excited to see them so heavily active. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Gen Zers, everything that they do on TikTok and Twitter. And that's the best thing, because ultimately you are the best messengers for your community, and politicians, those people that are in power, need to be listening to you.
I totally agree. I am a fan of TikTok. I am that person on there, scrolling through. And let me just say, it is amazing how young folks are using social media because, yes, TikTok has that algorithm and it only kind of narrows down what videos you watch. So I find it interesting that mine's always very mixed and the political ones get in there. But when I tell you, some of these people are so creative to try to get people out to vote, or even like why it's important to vote. I give all the young folks so much props. Like, there's a video that I recently just shared that cracks me up every day. I watch it every day, and it's literally a guy just talking to his friend about being a poll monitor, but then it was that confusion of a poll, POLE, worker, or a poll worker. So that video, it's on my Facebook. I love it. I watch it every day because it just puts me in such a good mood. But the creativity, y'all just are doing amazing and using your platforms to just, get that word out. It's just, even to poll workers. I mean, that was never cool back then.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because honestly, so many people will write off this current generation as just like kids who don't care, but we definitely care. I mean, just as Anytown Las Vegas, there's over 200 of us that definitely care about everything that's going on. And I think that we have just learned to use social media as a tool to kind of fuel everything and to express ourselves in the way that we want to change things, and using that as a social justice tool rather than having that just be like something for fun. I think that's that's honestly what I think is one of our biggest assets. So I'm definitely glad that you brought that up. So one of the things that not a lot of young people know is the actual process of registering to vote. So can one of you or both of you kind of walk us through the process of registering in this state, and any like fast facts that people should know?
Do you want to go, Brenda? Do you want me to go?
I mean, it doesn't matter. I think that's a big question, just because this year has been so many new, laws and so many new things happening. There is folks who still have questions, right? But I'll go, and then you could add if I forget something, Erika. But register to vote this year, you can pre-register at 17 years old, and if you're going to turn 18 before the election. And a lot of folks don't know that, because when you go ask someone, they're like, I'm only 17. And I'm like, well, if your birthday, is before the election, you can just be ready and be able to vote on election day. So that's a good fact to know and good note to take. And this year, because of COVID, we also got, we can vote by mail. And this is another option added to what we already had, because we had the absentee ballots before, but now we can just mail it back. Folks don't trust it. I mean, it's fine. We've seen a lot of articles of folks. There was just one this morning, they burned down a ballot box where people were dropping off. They committed arson in there, and people just lost their ballots that way. So trust issues is real. I get it. But you can also just go drop it off at the election department or other sites. You can also vote in person. Early voting started this past Saturday. So Saturday was crazy. I know some folks were out on the field. I unfortunately was not able to be out there, but I did see some folks and tried to see what ways I can help. But people were out there this weekend. During the week, they close at 7 p.m. So it's always, you can go. There might be no lines. It might be shorter if you really want to do the experience of being in person and pressing the buttons, which I think for first-time voters, that's a thing, right? I mean, that's still a way you want to do it. But I don't think I have anything else to add. Erika?
The only thing I'd add is in 2019, we also were able to pass a law so that for automatic voter registration. So when you go to the DMV, you can opt in and you're automatically registered to vote. If you're not registered to vote, though, you can also do, you can register up until the day of election. So there's no deadline. You can go, if you're not registered to vote, you can go to early vote location. You can register to vote there and then also vote right there and then. So that's another thing. You can just go to the polling location and vote from there. You can still technically register online, but I wouldn't recommend it because you might not get your ballot to be able to mail it in your mailbox anymore. So it's better to go to a polling location now, just because we're so close to the election. Register to vote there, and then you can just cast your vote there. That's the main thing that I would suggest for folks if they're not registered to vote. And like Brenda mentioned, if you are going to be turning 20, not 21, if you are going to be turning 18 before November 3rd, you can also register to vote and vote in this election.
I want to add a little bit more. I'm sorry. Because if you did get a ballot in the mail and you go in person to vote, you do have to surrender your mail-in ballot. So that is a thing you have to surrender, or, sign an affidavit. I can never say that word. Affidavit saying that that you're not going to vote twice, just to prevent any voter fraud. But that is a note I wanted to take.
Yeah, and if you're voting by mail, make sure that you do it accurately. You can go to our website because it's a little bit different depending on what county you live in, because you might have to sign it in a different place. But make sure that you fill out your ballot, you sign it in the designated place where your ballot tells you to sign it, and then you should have 2 different envelopes to mail it back. One of them is like a protective sleeve. You put it inside the protective sleeve, and then the other one is your envelope. It's already paid postage, so you just put it back in there. You could drop it off on your mailbox, like right outside your house, or you can drop it off in an official drop box as well. So there's definitely, as Brenda mentioned, there's definitely options to do it. I'm sure that Brenda can probably share more info from their website. If you can also check out our website at planevada.org, and we also have all that information on there as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of options. I just want to keep adding, there's no excuses this year, y'all. No excuses at all. You have early vote, you have same day registration, you have mail-in ballot, you have so many options. There's just really not an excuse. So, tell your close friends, I don't want to hear it because there was options and you had choices. But yes, our website is www.makeitworknevada.org. We do have some information there. But yeah.
All right, well, I put those 2 websites in the chat box so that everyone can go to their websites when we're done, look them up, all that stuff. So the COVID-19 pandemic has made it very difficult to find a polling place or a station to vote in person safely, with even fewer voting stations in lower income areas. How has the pandemic changed the way that you vote, and what can people still do to exercise their right to do so? I will pass that off to Erika first.
Thank you. So it's funny because, well, actually I can't vote because I'm undocumented, so I can't vote. But every year, since my brother turned 18, I vote with him. So it's like we set up a day and we go through the ballot. He looks through the candidates and everything. Right now, we already did that, but he's still trying to figure out the questions. So he's reading through the questions. He wanted to get a little bit more information. And then once he's done with that, we'll finish filling out his ballot and drop it off. So the interesting part about this time is that he was a little bit skeptical at first about mail-in ballots, because he wasn't sure like how he was going to do that, how he was going to get back to the elections department and stuff. So because of my work, obviously, like I had the information available for him, but I also just shared with him like different links and stuff to just kind of calm his nerves, and also so that he has that information for other friends that might also feel a little bit concerned. But yeah, this year I think what we're all gonna do is fill out the ballot and then just drop it off at our mailbox, which is across the street, because we have, in the houses that we live, it's just the little boxes. So we're just gonna walk our dog and drop our ballots together, and then my family, my two cousins who are citizens and they can also vote, they'll typically meet us at the polling locations and vote with us, well, with my brother, but they live across the street from us, so we're all just gonna walk together to our mailbox. So I'm excited about that.
That sounds fun. I like that. The good thing right now, because of COVID, there's so many orgs out there doing different events that are COVID friendly for folks to go out and vote. So Make It Work Nevada is actually hosting a ballot parade this Saturday. So folks are just going to stay in their car. We're asking them to decorate. We are nonpartisan, so just to get out to vote messaging. But we really want the kids to be involved and do something, with school, them being in school at home, and that's just hard. That's a lot. So we're just hoping our families can get together, have the kids decorate the car, be loud, yell, yell out the window, get out to vote or something, and just ride together to Pearson Center. And we're just going to drop them off there. So I know 2 other orgs doing stuff that same day. It's just so many options that we have, because yes, people do have trust issues with the, what is it called? USPS. No, USP. Yes. And I can't blame you. We sometimes kind of grow up seeing all these things over and over and over again. So it's fine, but there is options. There's definitely options to just do it any other way. And even voting in person. Our poll monitors have gone through training and they are doing all the safety measures 6 feet apart. They're just masked up. They're just taking care of everyone, because they are the most vulnerable who are working at the poll centers. They're the older folks who have all these underlying, diseases, and trust me, they care. They want everyone to be safe because they're trying to protect themselves too. So I think with COVID, there's just so many changes, but it's so many options that are still COVID friendly and COVID safe.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I've definitely seen over the past few weeks a lot of different events, whether they be virtual or in person, just with limited amount of people, asking people to get out the vote, or just to register there, or to help fill out the ballot, stuff like that, just as a way to kind of encourage people to still continue with the voting process, even if they can't do it in the way that they normally do. So then, Brenda, can you highlight a part of your voting experience that made you realize why it's so important? That could include submitting your ballot, filling it out, receiving it, or doing any of that with another person.
Yeah, it's very important. And I want to start with just the school board trustees. I think this is the year we really kind of started learning what the school board trustees do and what they have control and what they vote for. And there's so many parents like myself. I have 2 kids in elementary school who kind of need to start paying more attention. So even, I keep saying it's a presidential election, but it's really a local election that we need to kind of focus on. So many parents were angry during these board meetings, very, very angry if you go back on Facebook comments, and angry, angry, angry. Well, you know what? We have a chance to kind of change this. If you didn't like what your trustee said or what your representative said in the school board, there's a chance to vote in November. And people don't think about little things like that. So for me, it's very important to go out to vote for representatives like that. But my biggest one is definitely the school board trustees. They're making choices for my children. What else? President, yes, the president election is also important. I come from a mixed status family, so it's scary. It's very, very scary to see what kind of decisions will be made. And even our local legislators, right? Our legislators, during the special session, we saw a lot of stuff go down, and many folks were not happy, and our schools didn't get any money. But we can avoid in a way these things because we need to also step up and start holding these folks accountable. So pay attention to what these people are saying right now while they're trying to get your vote. So later on in the legislative session coming up, it's like, hey, this is what you said in October. Come through, right? Basically, like this is how you got my vote. So what are you gonna do now? So it's really important to really hold them accountable. So you have to pay attention to what everyone is saying from top to bottom. But no, I'm excited. I'm excited to vote today.
Yeah. Erika, did you want to touch on that about kind of your experience talking with your brother and with your cousins?
Yeah, actually one of my cousins, he's formerly incarcerated and he hadn't been able to vote previously. And this will be the first time that he's going to be able to vote. And it's funny because we were talking about the judges and he's not really, because he hasn't been able to vote, like he understands part of the politics and stuff, but he's not really too much into it. And just because of everything that he's been through because of the criminal justice system, we were talking about all of the judges that are on the ballot, and he's really excited to be voting some of them out. Which I think it just goes to show, like, there are so many people on our ballots, and kind of how we were talking about earlier, that sometimes we only focus at the top of the ticket or the presidential races, but there's just so many down the ballot, as you mentioned, Brenda, the schools, the trustees, judges, also now the Board of Regents as well. I know that my tuition went up, which is ridiculous that it went up during a pandemic. But yeah, I think there's so many races, and so many of them, so many of those candidates have like the direct impact in how our lives change or how they improve on a regular basis, and sometimes even more than the president. So I think like really focusing and like talking to our friends and our family and our community about those down ballot races and how those impact us every day has been probably like my best experience, because like you mentioned, oftentimes they don't realize that. One of my cousins, she has my nephew, he's autistic, and same thing, like she's starting to pay attention to like who is on the board of trustees, like who is actually in charge of making sure that the schools are funded and stuff like that. So they're finally like paying a little bit more attention to those things, which is ultimately what I want, because then I know that it'll create a culture where they'll continue to vote down ballot.
And I just want to add good luck to folks who are having those hard conversations at the table with their families, because it does get difficult. It is frustrating sometimes, but hang in there, because sometimes you might have a win, and you might have someone that's going to have that light bulb go off, and it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and you can register them to vote right there. So hang in there, don't give up, because at the long run, it's for the good for everyone.
Yes, definitely. I love that. I know in my experience, before school had closed for me, I was in the process of registering one of my friends to vote. And in the middle of him filling out the form, he turned to me and he was like, "Why does this even matter? Like, can we just like not do this?" I was like, no, no, we cannot. And it was very bluntly just like, well, if you have the privilege of voting, then vote. Like, you have a say in our government. You have a say in who is the president. You have the say in who are your senators, who are your state senators, who are your school board trustees, who are your judges, your sheriffs, your county commissioners, like everybody. Like, you have a say in that. So say something, like there's no point in throwing away that type of privilege just because there are a lot of people in this world who don't have that. And we have come so far. I think partly because of that, and because we have the ability to vote whoever we want in office, you know, we just shouldn't take that for granted. And I think that both of you really highlighted like the biggest part of that. So I'm definitely glad that we have that question. Um, so can you kind of talk about what kind of challenges you've run into when it comes to helping somebody fill out a ballot, helping someone register to vote, or doing it yourself?
Oh man, this was an interesting election so far. So I've been out on the field and registering folks to vote when we were still in the time frame to do it. And for me, honestly, the most frustrating, because I do come from a mixed family, it was frustrating to talk to some parents and they would say, I cannot vote. And they would have a teenager in their car who was over 18 and they did not want to register to vote and they did not want to just vote because they say it doesn't matter. And it was hard for me to walk away and I would get emotional because it's frustrating, y'all. Like you can be that voice for your parent. And I guess because I'm the voice for my parents at the same time, I take it very, very personal. And it hurts because it's just you're literally letting your voice go and not using your right to vote. And there's bad things happening, right? I mean, there's so many things happening in our country right now where we cannot afford not to register to vote, especially as a young person. And I would kind of not even focus it as the president. I would just kind of try to do the conversation of like, well, how did you feel being in high school, right? Did you like how your school was being run, how your funding was being run? And they're like, well, I don't care anymore. I'm like, okay. So it was just, just some people that you really can't get to. That's why I say hang in there, because you're going to get those people. But I mean, you're going to just keep going and keep trying, because you got one no and you're just going to keep going up the line and you're going to get 3 more folks that are going to care and are going to realize how important this election is. But that's been one of the most frustrating things that I've dealt with registering folks to vote. Filling out the ballot. All my friends are very political, so a lot of them kind of already had their own plan and they already were ready to go, and I'm just kind of like, okay, I'm glad to see this, right? But I do get my high school friends' families do reach out and they say, Mija, how do I do this? How do I do that? What does this mean? So I love helping those families that we sometimes kind of forget, or we don't really think that they're so involved, but they are. Television is doing their thing. But it's been great. I've had a great experience with folks filling out their ballots in that part.
I think for me, it was a little bit different this year because because of everything with COVID and stuff. Typically, we're out on the street, we're registering people to vote outside of Spitz or CVS, the DMV, like wherever there is people, we are there making sure they're registered to vote. And this year, because of COVID, we didn't do that. So it was different to not be on the ground and like in front of people's faces and like connecting with them the way that we typically do. But from our conversations on the phone, from our conversations and texting people, all of that, we've actually had a pretty good response from folks that they're ready to vote, they're registered to vote. A lot of folks just kind of eager to get it done, just be done with it. And I also wonder if that's part of like the work that we've been doing for the past 4 years as organizers and this organization, that we haven't let down or we haven't let this administration slide with anything. And we've been really fighting to make sure that we're holding them accountable and pushing back at every, bad thing they throw at our communities. So I think people were just really eager to say, okay, I've been waiting for this moment for 4 years, and I'm going to get out and I'm going to do it. So that's kind of been my experience. There has been, the typical issues with some people that say their vote doesn't matter, or they're just not very happy with which I completely understand. I think ultimately we just have to remember, as some of y'all were mentioning, that it is a privilege to be able to vote. A lot of us are not able to, and a lot of people have died and fought for the ability for some of us to be able to vote. So it might not change everything. You know, it's not going to be like a flip of the switch that on November 3rd you vote, you made sure that you voted, and then by the next day things are going to be better. Like that's not how our democracy works. We have to continuously show up. Like we don't stop showing up after we vote. And I think that's the other thing that's really important for folks to remember, that it's not just your vote. It's about calling your state legislator, calling your city council, calling your mayor, and demanding and holding them accountable, showing up to the state legislature when there's a session, and making sure that you're advocating for the policies that you want to advocate for. So I think that's the other thing, like reminding folks that it doesn't end on election day. That's just another event that we have to show up as citizens, as people that live here.
Definitely. I love that you said that. And honestly, Brenda, I definitely feel you. Like, I get super emotional when it comes to talking to people about voting and like why it's important in social justice in general, just because, you know, a lot of people, they don't really understand that when it comes to people of color and women and the LGBTQ plus community, like we want people to vote, and we're voting because whoever we vote for and whatever we're voting for, it kind of determines like basically whether we live or die. And I've had to have that very serious conversation with tons of people. I mean, I've done a lot of phone banking events across the years, and just kind of talking to people, and them going, oh, well, you know, like doesn't really matter, or the election is rigged, or I don't like the candidates, or anything like that. And I'm just like, look, like if you don't vote, there's a chance that we're gonna have somebody really bad in office. We're gonna get some really bad laws, and a lot of really good people and really good groups of Americans who want to see themselves and their families and their country thrive, they're not going to make it. And sometimes you just have to be like that blunt with people and just kind of say like, look, this election determines whether I live or die. Are you going to vote or not? And honestly, like at the same time, like it's that simple. Like it really is that simple. Um, and there have just been so many, there are so many challenges when it comes to saying that and getting that reaction from people. And there are some people that still will just be like no and just walk away, and you have to leave that situation feeling like disappointed and not sure, like how can I convince somebody that this is the fight of our lives, because it actually is the fight of our lives. And it's really hard to convince somebody of that if they can't really see it. So yeah, it's definitely frustrating. Politics are frustrating, whether you work in politics or you're just voting. Like it can be really, really frustrating.
But it's also a good thing.
Yeah,
I don't want to discourage anyone from being out there, because it, you know, there is those experiences, right? There is those those folks that we got to deal with, but you got to move on. It's a great experience. Like I mentioned earlier, I'm very competitive, so getting them to be like, yeah, I'll register. Oh, that's the best feeling ever.
Yes.
But you know, it's still do it. I recommend everyone to be a canvasser, you know, registering folks out, knocking doors, doing something at least one cycle just for the experience, and really see, you know, how just many folks think out in the world. Is they don't all think like you, they don't all think like your circle, they don't all think like your family members. It's really interesting. It's such a great experience.
Yes, definitely. I think it is honestly one of the most like rewarding things. And it also makes you just a more educated voter, I feel like, because once you actually go out and you participate in a campaign, or you are a poll worker, or just a volunteer for anybody, and you kind of see like the work that people put into their campaigns and the effort that it takes to encourage other people to vote, like it makes you like just want to do better. I mean, for me, working in campaigns and talking to poll workers, like that made me feel like, oh, like, well, when I get to vote, now I really want to vote, because I see like there's so much more behind it, and there's so much more behind my one ballot or this person's one ballot. Like this is so much more than just me. So it definitely just, it creates a different experience. And I totally recommend it to anybody, because even if you don't vote, or you are, even if you are ineligible to vote, I should say, it's still just like a really interesting experience. You get to talk to so many different people, get different perspectives, and you just like educate yourself more about the people that are running and the laws and all of that stuff. So 10 out of 10, definitely recommend definitely recommend being a volunteer. So I'm going to switch to Facebook. There is a question that came up from someone. So this is from Rico. He asks, after people cast their ballot, now what? How does the journey of accountability for elected officials look like? Does anybody want to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. I can take that because not being able to vote sometimes feels like I don't have a say in my future. But I know that deep down, I know that that's not true. I know that I do have a say, and that goes back to like the accountability. I might have not voted for those candidates, but I canvass for candidates, I phone bank, I register people to vote, I text folks. So I do as much as I can to make sure that other people get out and vote. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the election is simply a step into the direction that we're trying to get. It's not necessarily the end of it. So after this election, for instance, we have the legislative session. Starting in 2021, we're going to begin the legislative session at a local level. That's where we're going to figure out, how do we make sure that our schools are well funded? How do we make sure that people don't end up in jail simply because they couldn't afford to pay a traffic ticket? How do we make sure that we can actually expand and protect healthcare, especially during a pandemic when so many people need it? So the way that it looks is continuing to be civically active. And there's plenty of organizations like Make It Work, like Plan, that will happily give you the tools and the resources that you need to be able to continue to hold those elected officials accountable. Last legislative session, we took a few different trips up to Carson City. We take buses up there, we lobby our legislators, we meet with different legislators on the issues that are important to us. And honestly, to be able to see so many young people of color in that building when typically it's full of like older white men, it's, to me, that's revolutionary, because we're making sure that we have a seat at that table, whether they invite us or not. Like, we are going to show up. And I think that really shows them that the power that we have, because we show up at the elections, we're making sure that they hold office, but then after that, we're also showing up to their offices and saying, okay, we voted for you. This is what you said you were going to do for our communities. So let's get to work. So ultimately, like, that's how it is. It's just, how are you going to work with your elected officials to make sure that things get done?
Ditto to everything Erika said. Yes, it's all about accountability. Legislative session is around the corner. It's right after election. I mean, after you vote, there's so much more work to be done. Definitely took buses up there last legislative session. We're policy driven at Make It Work Nevada. So this is where everyone we've been talking to and everyone we encourage to get out to vote, it's okay, it's time to share your story, right? Because going up there and testifying your personal stories is what helps change policies. Because paid sick days, I mean, here in Las Vegas, and this can happen to anyone, so it's, you get to hear stories, And it's just kind of saying, all right, we got to change this before this affects me, before this is a problem for me. Equal pay, we passed our equal pay SB 166 last year with Senator Pat Spearman, and it was just kind of to cut that wage gap. There is a wage gap still in Nevada. We're in 2020 and people are still fighting to get equal pay. What? So it's things like that we don't realize, like, oh, we have a say in this. We can go testify and change this because this is not what we're here for, right? We're not going to thrive this way. So yes, sharing your stories, getting involved, going to these orgs, kind of talking to an organizer, because yes, electoral, campaigns, all this electoral year is important, but it's more than that. It goes beyond that because it's changing our livelihood and the way we're living.
Yes, yes. Ditto to both of you then, I should say. Because yeah, a lot of people kind of think that they're like, okay, well, I elected the person that I wanted to be in office. Now they're in office. Like, I'm done. Like, I'll just let them do whatever. Like, no, like you have to hold them accountable. You definitely have the option of going up to their office, whether it be in Carson City or here in Las Vegas. And if you can't do that, you can call them, you can email them. That is what they are there for on the website. Their phone numbers and email addresses are on there for everyone to see in public. You can definitely talk to your legislators and just, like tell them what you want, basically. Like be educated, read the bills that they propose and the laws that are in place right now. I mean, and you were right. Honestly, testifying for or against a bill, like it definitely matters and it makes a huge difference, because it's one thing just to say like, oh, like I don't really like this bill because it hurts me in this way, and then like looking them in the eye and telling them like, this is the way that it will affect my life. That is a very, very powerful tool that every single person in the country has. And it also creates like a very different experience, and it makes you kind of see your senators and your assembly people in a very different way. And it just makes you realize how powerful you are, because every single person has the power in their elections. So,
And I just want to add, don't assume because you voted someone that they're going to do these things, because they probably won't. And just being honest, some just say what you want to hear to get your vote, and then when it comes to being up in Carson City, they ain't going through with it. That's when you got to go and bust a whole Nicki Minaj and be like, what's good, come on, and hold them accountable that way. Because just don't assume, please, because I know so many folks are out there and saying what you want to hear and saying all the right things, but don't come through.
yes, yes. Hold every single elected official accountable, because if they said they're going to do something, you need to make sure that they do it. Period. Uh, so this next question is for you, Erika. So Plan has an affiliate titled Mass Liberation, looking to assist convicted felons in ending mass incarceration. Can you discuss how your organization addresses the issue of voter disenfranchisement and some specifics of it?
Yeah, so Mass Liberation is part of Leslie Turner's work. She's an amazing organizer. I am very blessed to be working with her. And she has been making sure that she's investing in directly impacted folks, whether they were formerly incarcerated or they have family members that are formerly incarcerated or are currently incarcerated. She's been working with them and making sure that they're developing a platform that's really going to impact and better their lives. There's no reason why, elected officials should say, these are all of the things that you need, when people that are directly impacted are the ones that have the solutions to these issues. So she's really been working very closely with folks, developing policy proposals, also doing some direct services, helping bail people out. And then when they bail them out, also helping them get settled on their feet, whether that's through housing, making sure they're setting them up with different programs, stuff like that. And then the added part of it is also making sure that they register to vote and that they get out and vote. As Plan Action, we've been working to restore voting rights to people that were formerly incarcerated. And we were able to do that through a lot of the work that Leslie was able to do in 2019. So now in the state of Nevada, if you were formerly incarcerated, you have the ability to regain your voting rights. So you can register to vote and get out and vote, and that's it. So for us, that's a huge win, because ultimately, if someone, whatever it was that they went to jail for, once they're out of jail, like it's off. They've done what they've had to do, and now they should have the right to be able to cast their votes, because ultimately the people that are going to be in power are the ones that are creating the laws that are continuously incarcerating people like us. So being able to make sure that they regain those rights, and then vote for candidates that are actually going to take their experiences into account and push for policies that are going to improve their lives. It's part of the work that Leslie's doing. I would definitely recommend that you all sit down and have a conversation with her, maybe invite her, and she could definitely talk a lot more about the work that she's doing, because I can't do it justice.
Yes. Can one of you talk about what exactly voter disenfranchisement is, and give like an example?
Yeah, I mean, I can give an example, and Brenda, I don't know if you want to jump in afterwards. But the way that I see it is like there are tons of ways where someone can be disenfranchised to vote. If you are someone that doesn't have a home, there are states that require you to be able to have a license to be able to register to vote and to be able to vote. Luckily, here in the state of Nevada, you don't need your driver's license to be able to register to vote. You don't need an ID to be. There's also issues where there might not be as blatant, but for instance, when we're cutting down the amount of polling locations, specifically in communities of color, where we know there's going to be high turnout of Black folks, brown folks, stuff like that, that's another way that it's more subtle, but it's still voter disenfranchisement, because you're creating less opportunities for them to be able to cast their votes. We often also see this in the Indigenous communities. For instance, during the primary, there were some issues there because the Indigenous communities, they have to travel up to, I think it's a little bit over 100 miles to be able to drop off their ballots to the nearest polling location. If someone has to drive over 100 miles to simply drop off their ballots and exercise their right to vote, that's also voter disenfranchisement, because people should be able to have access to it and do it easily instead of having to drive those 100 miles. So there's a lot of different ways that somebody can be disenfranchised and really just intimidated by being able to cast their vote.
I really want to just bring up another example because Arizona is having that situation right now with the indigenous folks. They cannot travel because of COVID and they're worried. So they're feeling like they're not going to be able to cast their vote this year. And correct me if I'm wrong on this one, Erika, but Florida also, even though they restored the right to vote for the formerly incarcerated, there's fees that they have to pay before. So that's what's stopping them. Okay, so yes. That's not letting them vote for this election, even though it was voted for them to vote 2 years ago. So it's those little things that are happening. And I really want to just let folks know, go do some research on it because I feel like Nevada's doing really well when it comes to that. We don't have that many barriers. But when I went to a conference last year and I was talking to other states, oh my goodness, states like Texas, there have some just little things and little rules that are not letting everyone be able to cast their vote and vote. So we're very, very lucky, but it all comes down to who we voted for and who we have represented us because we're looking into that. And orgs who are doing the work, the coalitions here. So yes, look into it. It is crazy. There's TikTok videos about it.
Yeah, and the other thing that I would add is, a lot of the times we also see like voter intimidation, where there could be people at polling locations that are simply trying to intimidate voters. So if you see any issues, if you are concerned that somebody is being intimidated as a voter, somebody's being disenfranchised, make sure to also check out the ACLU webpage. They have a ton of resources to help voters, and they also have a hotline. I know that our local ACLU is very active. So if you have any questions, definitely feel free to check out their website. And they're very active. They also have a hotline. I don't know the number at the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure it's probably on their website as well. And just flag it if you see anything. Ultimately, voting is a right that if you are over the age of 18 and you are a citizen, you have the right to be able to vote and nobody can take that away from you. So don't be intimidated and talk to someone if you are a little bit confused or want more answers.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. So, Brenda, earlier this year, coronavirus forced over 30 businesses in the Las Vegas area to close, whether that be temporarily or permanently. But Make It Work Nevada has actually stayed open all this time. And so, working in a business that stayed open throughout the year, how did this affect your job as the digital communications director and engaging with your audience?
It was overwhelming as being the only digital person and at the org. I have a little staff of 6 now. It was a lot because then it was kind of, it's Brenda's time to shine, right? Everything we've been doing, it's kind of like all on you. So it was it was a lot. But we ended up pivoting to just doing things online. So everything we would do before COVID, we would do our kitchen table conversations. And those were just kind of like, for example, Erika, you're passionate about equal pay. So you would just kind of grab a group of friends and one of our organizers would go and we would just have a conversation of how it's affecting and how we could change it locally and just kind of educating folks that way. So with COVID happening and shutting everything down, no, we could not do that. So we couldn't do our bread and butter, which was KTCs, what we call them, for a very long time. So we ended up pivoting to just doing everything online. The problem happened when our folks that we talk to and we try to organize are folks who are working families and don't have Wi-Fi at home, don't have smartphones, So trying to get them to be like, oh, join Facebook or join us on Facebook, it was impossible. So many of them just still had their flip phones and they were like, I don't even have a Facebook. So getting in contact with those, we were just kind of like, okay, we're really going to have to sit down and make phone calls. And everyone had the time to talk because everyone was at home. But getting these stories of folks realizing that there's nothing like paid leave in Nevada, there's nothing like good paid sick days that we have in Nevada, they got upset. and they started getting that energy to be like, well, why don't we have this? I have COVID, symptoms last for 14 days. What am I going to do for work for those who are still working? And I'm like, well, this is why we've been trying to advocate for paid leave. Paid leave is going to cover 12 weeks for you, that to recover. They're paid, so you don't have to choose between your bills and being sick. So we were able to kind of tie in everything that we've been talking about and trying to educate our community about in this moment. And it sucks, right? It sucks that people are finally noticing it now when it's kind of like stuff is on fire, right? The roof is on fire and everyone's like just running around because we don't know what to do. Well, things, this is why it's important to start listening to what orgs are here trying to fight for when it comes to economic justice, because this is exactly what we were trying to avoid, and we kind of just started focusing on those families who needed more help. We started seeing how we can help them with food banks, because many families lost their jobs. And then when school went all digital, we had to really have these phone calls with these families and give them resources of how they could get $9.99 Wi-Fi at home, even though it's not the best, but it was going to get them.
So like in urban places like Vegas, where we just saw a lot of people that they can't volunteer because they don't have access to a smartphone. We're using this app called Outvote, and sometimes it's really hard to get folks on it because they're like, you're asking me to jump on Zoom and you're asking me to jump on Outvote, and then like I have to read the script, and some folks are just not as tech savvy, so like having to really almost like reinvent other ways in which people can get engaged and still feel part of the community. Because I think that's also been the hard part, that as community organizations, like we thrive on being able to build community and like make sure that we're creating spaces where people can come together and like strategize, figure out what they want for their communities and the change that they want to make. And doing that virtually it's been challenging because you don't have that energy in the room. But we've also seen, especially at the beginning, where, as Brenda mentioned, like people really wanted to talk on the phone. People really wanted to like express themselves and like really talk about like what they were dealing with, what they were struggling with. So I think as we transition into like the election and like who are you voting for and stuff like that, people began to like want to talk less, because I think they're just like, I know who I'm voting for, I know what I'm doing. But I think prior to that, when I can share. I mean, I can't vote either. I am 31 now. I was like, how old am I? I'm 31 now, and I still can't vote. I grew up here. I've been here since I was 3 years old. So I've been here all my life. And sometimes it is frustrating, and sometimes I get FOMO, like the whole fear of missing out. And it's like I don't have an opportunity to like I see everybody all excited with like their selfies and their, mail-in ballots and stuff. So I get that there's frustration. But as I mentioned before, like there's still so much more work to be done outside of an election that like the vote isn't the only thing. Like it's very important and it definitely matters, but it's not the end goal. We have to hold our elected officials accountable. We also have to make sure that the rest of our friends and family get out and vote. I know that like I have family and friends that are eligible to vote, but I'm always also having to make sure that they're registered, make sure that they're doing the research on their candidates, and that I'm following up with them so that they have a plan and it's not too late. So don't ever feel that because you didn't cast a vote, your voice doesn't matter, or you didn't have, a say in this election, because that's not true. If you are registering voters, if you are turning voters out to vote, if you are reminding your friends and family that there is an election and they can't sit this out, then your voice is being heard. You are doing your part. And then after the election, we will continue to do the same work of holding our elected officials accountable. And in those places, like you can go to your legislator, and let them know that you live in their district and that they represent you. And it doesn't matter whether you voted for them or not. The fact that you live in their district, they need to listen to you and your voice will be heard. So ultimately, yes, your vote is super important and it does matter, but it's not the end goal of it. It's not the only thing that you can do to create the change that you want to see.
I agree. I got into this work because my parents were very, very involved. And Erika smiles because I know she knows my parents. My parents were in the Latinx community. They are the go-to people. And they were in this before I was even in this. So they kind of just led that example for me of like, even though they cannot vote, they're still out here knocking doors, making phone calls. Like, and when I tell you, my parents have had some important people in their home, it's insane to me. Senator Jackie Rosen has been in their house like twice. They've had tacos el gordo. They've had, full on things because they just know my parents will show up, right? My mom has gone up to to Carson City, and she's taken my sister with her, and it's like, we got to go and testify about this, and she pulls the people that she can. My parents have been leaders for folks who can vote, and they've been the go-to people to like, hey, this is what's going on, what do you think? And they come to my parents for advice. So you definitely have so many things you can do to make a change, because my parents have their own little group and their own little following, and they are making change, because when they show up to the polls, they will bring everyone to the polls. So yes, there's still ways. Grab your friends, grab your family.
Trust me, Brenda, I know exactly what you're talking about. My parents are very involved as well. Yes, but I mean, I guess also speaking as a youth leader who is passionate about social justice yet is ineligible to vote at the moment, I would say, yeah, grab your friends, grab your peers, grab your family, anybody who has that ability and has that opportunity, and just like help them get educated and help them understand like the gravity of whatever situation that you're in, and make sure that they do vote, as well as just like educating yourself. Like, just because you can't vote doesn't mean that you shouldn't know what other people are voting on, doesn't mean you shouldn't know about the nominees, or the bills that are being passed. You just have to be an informed citizen, honestly. And as we mentioned before, canvassing, phone banking, volunteering, signing up to be a poll worker, those are all ways that you can get in, engage with your community and kind of amplify your voice without actually casting a ballot, because campaigns need help. I'll say that. Campaigns, nonprofit organizations, like they need a lot of help. So it's very helpful for people to come in, sign up to volunteer, even if it's just for a half hour, even if it's just for an hour, like anything helps. The experience is great. And like I said, you're amplifying your voice. So I think that is just one of the many ways that people can do that. And at Anytown Las Vegas, we also have tons of events going on. Right now, all of them are virtual, of course. We have our Instagram lives that are occurring every single Friday, all throughout this month. Keep the one that's going on this Friday. It's going to be awesome. As well as, going to camp if you can. That is a great way to get involved in your community, talking to your legislators, giving them a call, giving them an email. That's like 5 different ways that I just spouted of ways that you can get involved in your community without actually voting. And all of those ways are equally important. So there are so many different opportunities. Don't think that there's nothing you can do, because there's always something you can do. So kind of circling back to something that we touched upon earlier in our town hall, what is something that you would say to someone who expressed to you that they did not feel voting was important or brushed off your attempts to register them?
Ooh. So I always try to kind of just ask questions and also get to know the person before just completely walking away from them, because some folks don't realize that the smallest things can affect them and their vote can make a change. So kind of just, I usually just have a conversation. Do you have kids? And this is where the passion came from registering folks to vote back 2 years ago, because I was on the field, at grocery stores and just talking to random people. And it's like, do you have kids? If it was a yes, it was an easy, we got to vote for school board trustees and slide in there with that. Or, folks who were at the bus stops, I'm like, do you like how this is running? Do you like how your bus stop looks? Is it satisfying for you? Do you feel safe being inside a bus? And it all just tie it to something that it's in the, on the ballot and that we're voting for. So that's how I would kind of just get folks to kind of learn and register them to vote in those 5 minutes that we had with those people. So it's kind of, that's what I would do. I don't know what to do yet with folks who are just kind of like, it doesn't matter, because some folks have won with the electoral vote. And even I tell them it's all about local elections, they're still kind of just stuck there. And I kind of just have to kind of move on. If I'm trying to have a conversation and trying to talk to them and explain to them that it's also what's around you at the moment, and it's just not going to get through them, you at a point have to say, I need to use this energy for someone who is actually going to listen to me and we could have a conversation. So kind of also knowing that about yourself, right? Knowing that how much you can give and put energy for this person.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. It can be challenging to convince people sometimes, but I think ultimately, like, getting to know them and getting to understand, like, why is it that they don't want to vote, is always like my thing as well. So typically if I ask someone like, hey, do you need to register to vote? Do you need whatever it is? And if they say no, sometimes I'll just ask them why they don't want to vote. And then typically sometimes they'll say like, oh, because, I care about job security and I've been struggling to find a job and like make, decent living and stuff like that. And then we start talking about, like, as Brenda mentioned, like local politics and how that actually has a lot more to say. And like, I would just kind of tie it to what's currently happening. I think right now, one of the biggest things that we're hearing from folks is because of COVID is like the fear of losing access to healthcare. So talking to folks about like what is at stake around healthcare, around our economy, around education. So really like asking them like what is it that makes them not want to vote, and then reminding them of like all of these different things that are at stake in this moment. Sometimes people care, sometimes they don't, as Brenda mentioned. I think another thing that works is also like sharing my personal story and really connecting with people. I think when you're able to be vulnerable with people and share with them like what is at stake for you in this election, they'll open up a little bit more as well and like share maybe some of their frustrations on why they might not want to vote. And a lot of the times, when it is frustration and you kind of explain to them like the different level of politics, they can turn around and be more inclined to vote. So I think really focusing on like the local politics and how that impacts our lives on a regular basis is always super helpful. And also just, as I mentioned, connecting with them on a personal level is also helpful.
Yes, I really like what you said, Erica, connecting with them on a personal level, because when you're talking to somebody, whether it be on the phone or directly in person, or just like through an email sometimes, like it really puts things into perspective. There's such a difference between saying, oh, this group may not be able to get their rights if this person's elected, and saying like me, person that is talking to you right now, is probably not going to be able to secure their rights if this person gets elected. Like it's so much different when you're like looking right at the person and you're kind of forced to confront the issue head on because it's right in front of you. So I just think that was a really good point that you made, because it is just it feels different when you're standing right in front of somebody and saying that. So can you provide, both of you, your organization's websites, social media handles, any campaigns that you're currently working on, before we wrap up our town hall?
Ours is kind of our social media. So we're on TikTok too, y'all. Because I'm telling you, I love the whole TikTok and I'm trying, but I don't think I'm as creative. But our TikTok, our Twitter, our Facebook, and our Instagram is all at MIWNV. And then our website is www.makeitworknevada.org. So we have a lot of fun stuff on there too. We have our announcements thing. So right now we do have, we're selling some t-shirts because we are a nonprofit. We have our Get Free Together t-shirts, and all proceeds are going to Make It Work Nevada. If you donate to our page, you get a mask also that says silence will not protect us, because folks are out here protesting, but we want y'all to be safe. So please wear a mask. So we have our cute little masks, and we're prepping for our ballot parade drop off. We know some folks did it over the weekend, so we get it if you don't have a ballot to drop off, but even if you want to grab the kids and decorate the car and kind of just ride around with us, we would really appreciate, anyone who wants to join us. And you can get more info on our website as well for that. And just kind of just supporting and amplifying some of the work that we're doing on our social. There's some good videos for some folks. We have our Make It Make Sense segments with our political director, Quentin, on Thursdays. And last week he did a whole ballot walkthrough with some guests, and it was very, very long, but it was very informative. Even though I'm in the work, I found it informative. I said, okay, because they break down what's on the ballot. So from judges, what that means, school board trustee, what that means, legislator, senators and assembly representatives, what does that mean for you? So it was a very, very great segment. We're doing a debate debrief this Thursday, right after the debate for, the presidential debate. So we're all nonpartisan. And so it's just kind of real conversations, right? Like, how is this affecting you as a person in our community, more than kind of this side and this side? So that's what we got going on.
Yeah, I think for us, similarly, so we have we do have a nonpartisan side, which is plan, and then we have our partisan side, which is plan action. When we have events happening on both sides, we're also making sure that our community gets out and votes. So we'll be having different GOTV events for both sides. If you want to participate in any of those, definitely check out our websites either at planevada.org or at planaction.org. Both of the informations for both sites are there. We do have, if you want to get more involved with Plan, we do have Plan 101s once a month, and we also have our Plan Welcomes also once a month. And those are for folks that, you know, want to get involved and maybe don't know where to start. Typically at our Plan 101s, we give a little bit of an overview of some of the work that's happening, some of the things that we're doing and focusing on. And then from there, you get to hear a little bit about our history and kind of where we're at now. Our next one is actually this Thursday. So if you're interested in joining us for that, definitely check out our website so you can sign up for that. You can also email me at ecastro@planevada.org and I can send you more information for that as well. And then the last thing I'll mention is on our plan action side, we have this really cool app called Outvote. And one of the things that I like about the app is that you're able to see who in your friends and family, like who in your contacts has already voted, who needs to register to vote, who you need to follow up with. So we do events around that. We teach people how to use the app. And then that way, like you can do your own canvassing, phone banking and stuff into your own networks and double check that they are all set and ready to vote. So yeah, there's definitely tons of ways to get involved. So like I said, you can email me or check out one of our websites. And then our Twitter, or all of our handles, actually, they're at PLAN, or it's at PLA Nevada. So at PLANEVADA.
And like Skylar said earlier, volunteering, we would all appreciate it. All of us, because, you know, even though we have some things here and there, we are COVID friendly and we do have our masks and sanitizers and we want to make sure everyone is safe, but we would appreciate any volunteers as well. Just kind of, we got events and we need help just kind of having everyone stay 6 feet apart. So yes, check our website, please. We love it. Or even any creative TikTokers out there, please hit me up. I need it. I got some skits, but I can't figure out how to execute them. But come through.
I love that. Yes, anybody who's TikTok savvy, please hit us up. Because Anytown Las Vegas, we also have a TikTok. We don't do much on there, but we're working on it. So, you know, it's up and coming. We're all up and coming on there. So it's all good. So how can Anytown Las Vegas and the members of our organization assist you?
I think, as Brenda mentioned, volunteering. We're always looking for volunteers. And I think, at least for me, and I actually think this as well as Make It Work, we really focus and making sure that we're investing in people that are directly impacted. As I mentioned earlier, like I started doing this work as someone that was undocumented. I didn't have any experience, and being able to lead that work and like having my voice heard has been really life-changing for me. Because there was a point in my life where I would never talk this openly about my status, about who I am, and stuff like that. So definitely not only volunteer opportunities, but like leadership development and being able to grow into the person that, you know, the values that you hold. So if you want to get involved, as I mentioned, we have the Plan 101 on Thursday coming up. You can also help us out on the Plan Action side and making sure that voters get out and vote this election. And then we'll continue to have events from now until the election, and then also continuing to work on the legislature next year. So if you also want to help with that, go up to Carson City, go to the Grant Sawyer building here, hit us up, let us know.
Yes, volunteers are greatly appreciated. We are a small team, and there's so much work to do, right? And we work with families who are directly impacted by all these things that are happening. But even just folks who can kind of spare a few hours, a couple hours, 1 hour, I would be thankful, because there's so much that can help us kind of get to our mission. Even like if you're creative and you know how to use Canva and have time to make a quick graphic, because it's little things that are sometimes so time consuming, especially for me, from my side, from the digital side. Those things are sometimes so time consuming for me that it kind of takes away from all the other stuff that I have to do. And it's harder probably for me because I'm older and I'm trying to kind of get through this and see what's going to be eye-catching, but it might be something really easy for those who are younger, right? Who kind of are always on social media and know exactly what people like. And, I'm a meme person, so I used to take that time to make some memes through our Make It Work and make fun of like the minimum wage and stuff. But with elections, it's been hard for me to kind of sit down and do that. And it used to be very fun and folks really enjoyed it. But even like someone who might have that creativity who come in and it's like, hey, I have this vision, right? Just something so small like that can be so helpful for smaller orgs who is just trying to get by with a few people and still trying to get to this big mission of having folks really understand what's going on. And we see their issues, right? We see their stories. And yeah, going up to Carson is always fun sometimes, but it's a long ride. That's why I say sometimes, because it's a long ride, y'all. But if you go with a group of friends, you can make it fun. And it's fun being up there because it is, building leadership. I mean, I came into this role not knowing anything, and I feel I get recognition for some of the work that I do, and it's so rewarding. And I know that's also helpful, getting recognized and someone just telling you, the job you're doing is really awesome. This looks really dope. And it's kind of like, thank you. So I can only see how this can look in a resume for those younger folks who have that time to spare and could just sit and just create some things, right? That it's going to be eye-catching and get recognized. And it's all helpful. It can help you build your resume.
All right. And then lastly, what advice would you give to somebody coming into the world of voting for the very first time?
Don't let results affect your experience. Because if you tried your best and you really try to get folks to get out, don't let the results kind of just kill that for you and just not want to do it again. I hope people take it as more of a motivation. Hey, I got to get more folks, to come with me next time. I got to get more folks to understand why I voted this way so they could vote with me. So just don't let it get to you. The results, there is some L's that we got to take. And the results might be one of them, but we just got to keep going. We got 2 more years and we could vote for midterms, and it doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop. Keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I would say something similar. I would also add that, do your research on the candidates. Just because, they have a D next to their name or whatever party affiliation, do your research on the candidates. See what are their views, see what are some of the things that they share on their social medias, like who are they? So don't just vote blindly. It's really important that you're doing your research. I think the other thing too, is make sure that you vote down ballot. Like, as we've been talking about, how local elections are so important. Sometimes people don't pay attention to those like smaller elections, or they just, like, I've already done 15 candidates? Why do I have to do, 10 more? But those down ballot races all the way at the end of your ballot, those are just as important as the ones at the very top. So don't skip on any of the candidates. Make sure that you're voting down ballot. And lastly, what Brenda mentioned, sometimes the elections aren't going to go the way that we wanted them to. I mean, I think personally, 2016 was one of those for me. But, we're still here. We're still going to continue to organize regardless of who wins or who loses. Our lives don't stop. So yeah, don't be discouraged by the results. Just continue to show up and continue to organize.
Love it. Love it. Well, thank you so much, both Erika and Brenda, for coming on to this town hall. We definitely got a lot of viewers, so thank you so much to everybody who came to watch. Like I said before, we also have our Anytown Instagram Live happening every single Friday, talking about voting, the importance of voting, how to register, voter disenfranchisement, all those things. So tune in at 5:30 p.m. on our Anytown Las Vegas Instagram. Be sure to check out the plan website and the Make It Work Nevada website for more information on getting involved with them, how to volunteer, all of those things. And just thank you so much for coming, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Bye, y'all.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.